living in the moment, and the moment is the future.
With Pam and John.
Welcome to SPED Talk with Pam
and John,
also known as The Calm.
before the storm.
Our purpose is to elevate the conversation and amplify special education resources.
And our why is all about the kids. You know, Pam, there are so many organizations and people around Texas who are just making it happen for kids with disabilities.
So let's make this a platform to celebrate their efforts, because special education is about making the impossible possible.
Well,
Okay.
how Pam, did you have a question?
No, I'm fine, John.
Okay. I just want to make sure you're okay, Pam.
I'm good, John.
Okay. I sure do miss
It's
you
been a
guys.
while.
I know. All right. Well, here we are on SPED Talk via Zoom. This is the brave new world. I see three familiar, friendly faces that I haven't seen in person in quite some time. But Pam, I see you up there in the top of my screen.
Yes, I'm here, John. It has been a while. Who knew when we were in San Antonio, that was the last time we actually were going to be together.
Well, hopefully not forever, but yeah, it's starting to feel
Well,
like it, right?
Exactly. I've been thinking about, we always talk to parents about planning for, the day that the school bus doesn't come. And now it's like, okay, planning for when there's no school for anybody. And just, what does that look like? And now living that reality, it's, what a challenge. But the work still has to continue on.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does have to continue on. And I'll tell you, I've been so inspired with so many of the stories and of our colleagues and our friends around, not just the state, the nation, and really the globe, of educators providing meaningful opportunities for learning, even in this crazy experience we're going through, right? So yeah, I'm so excited to even get to see your faces and get to collaborate a little bit today. And we've got an important topic today, fiscal supports grant. We're all dealing with barriers and constraints right now that we couldn't have predicted, right? But I think on an ongoing, regular basis, our schools, are faced with a lot of these barriers, these constraints to really providing equity and quality and just services. Special education is such a complex area of education. And of course, we have Amy Rogers with us. She's sitting there quietly. I hope she jumps in here in a little bit. But we also have Amy Strauch from Region 20 with us today. And so we're excited.
John, Pam. Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad to be with you guys today, even if it's a virtual connection. I'm glad we are talking about this topic.
Pam, do you want to jump in and maybe you got a question or two?
I don't have, no, this is a little bit out of my wheelhouse. I'm going to let you and Amy Rogers and Amy Strauch really take the lead on this. I read the information Amy gave us, and then also, I've seen and, the work that's been going on. I've talked with special education directors who have, applied for the funds. And so that's about as much as I know. So I'm going to let experts jump in and share with our listeners about the grant.
Awesome. So, thinking back, Amy, I know, previously, just for our listeners, some of them may not be familiar, in your time with us as a special ed liaison, that was so awesome when we collaborated in that respect. And now more recently on the, I guess, first, the eval capacity grant school year that now has, I guess, in some ways, not necessarily morphed into fiscal supports grant, but in some ways it is kind of that next stage or that next iteration of these types of funds. Is that correct?
Yeah, John, that's exactly right. So I have been at Region 20 for going on 7-8 years now. And in my time at Region 20, I have been special ed liaison with you and Pam and Amy up in Austin for a few years. And I was an evaluation specialist, and now I'm a special ed coordinator. But my heart and soul and passion is that I'm a I'm a school psychologist. I'm an LSSP, and I spent 10 years in the trenches of school districts in San Antonio and Bexar County, working to evaluate and conduct child find activities. And this project, evaluation capacity, and in this next iteration, just as you described, special ed fiscal support really is something that at the heart of it is meant to improve child find activities for districts, to help them with funding to conduct child find activities in districts, and to really provide quality evaluation services. So you're exactly right. Evaluation capacity was a project and initiative that we were very grateful to be able to be part of at Region 20, along with our state education agency in the 18-19 school year. And special ed fiscal support was kind of the next incarnation of that in the 19-20 school year.
And so we, if I remember correct, we went through, was it 2 rounds of the eval capacity grant in that prior year, in which a lot of LEAs around the state, you know, benefited from additional funds to really, to, I guess, in some ways fill in some of the gaps in funding they were experiencing in relation to kind of this influx of evaluation requests and testing requests and just a lot of the stuff going on in Texas right now, as a way to kind of fill some of that funding gaps. And then now in 19-20 school year, I guess we've just completed, or we're kind of in that first cycle of fiscal support grant, and now are we about to open up into that second cycle?
We are, John. We are working very, very quickly to turn around round 2 of special ed fiscal support for the 19-20 school year. It has been just fast and furious behind the scenes at Region 20 to try to make this happen in a very short and expedited time frame to really help our school districts across the state that are, because of COVID-19 school closures, kind of facing the reality of how do we continue to provide special education supports to students while we don't have kids in a school building, which sometimes is required when we do direct related service supports or direct speech therapy supports or some of our direct kind of intensive instructional supports. I think so many school districts are rising to the challenge of trying to be innovative and figure that out. But at the end of the day, there also is going to come a reality that there are going to have to be conversations for a lot of our students with disabilities around, do we have a regression in skills and we need to look at extending so that we can recoup some of the gains that were previously made, or do we need to look at compensatory services that might be provided? And as districts face the immediate challenges, I think they're also thinking long term. When we get back to standard operating procedures, what does that look like? Whether that's the summer, whether that's even into next year, how do we support these students that have special education IEPs to the best of their ability? And in the end, sometimes that's going to mean that we have additional costs that come along with that. And I think as districts strive in the short term to create immediate solutions, they're also very thoughtful about long term and what additional solutions or conversations need to be planned on the horizon. And you're exactly right. I know you and Amy have been a huge part of the team that helps me at Region 20 and across the state in reviewing the applications that come in. And in round 1, we opened round 1 for special ed fiscal support. And this special ed fiscal support covers 3 areas. It covers initial evaluation, compensatory service funding, and extended school year funding. And in that first round of this school year, we were really amazed at how many districts applied with us. We had $50 million to disperse across the state.
Just a little bit of money.
Round 1, just a tiny little pot of money that the state legislature divvied out as a result of Senate Bill 500 last summer.
Yeah.
So $50 million, we had 298 applications come in. And of this 298, we've made some changes, wanted shared service arrangements to have an easier time getting applications in. So we allowed SSA to apply for all of their membership on round 1. And when I really put the numbers down on paper, we realized that we touched 520 LEAs across the state. So
That's huge.
that's just 50%.
Yeah.
Huge numbers of districts reaching out to us. And so what we really took a step back and said, there's still a continued need for evaluation support. Child find activities continue to rise in the state and continue to have increased occurrence, and no matter where in Texas. And there's a need for compensatory and ESY supports. Now, what we found, and the applications were due in the month of February, and I know that shortly after pandemic became kind of a worldwide phenomena, and we started to see shelter-in-place orders and statewide school closure orders. And so in February, districts didn't have this on their horizon, this compensatory conversation for COVID-19 or ESY conversation.
Yeah,
as
you
a
know,
result
Amy,
of COVID-19.
just jumping in real quick, I think it's a bit ironic in a way when you think about how in the early stages of this fiscal supports grant, there were conversations I remember even that we had where it said, well, you know, we didn't really know we were going to have the compensatory services funding and the ESY funding, and we're not exactly sure how to normalize having these funds for those reasons. And yet now we look at it and we say, oh my gosh, what a blessing. Who could have predicted?
So yeah, round one, we saw about $25 million dispersed for initial evaluation supports, and about 3 to 4 million dispersed combined for compensatory services and ESY supports. So as we were reviewing the applications, I started to get a lot of client and user feedback from our LEAs across the state saying, okay, can we amend our applications? Can we go back and ask for a different amount of money because our circumstances have changed? COVID-19 landed and now we are in a totally different situation. And at Region 20, we have a clear and utter motto, and that is, we support our client needs. We support the needs of school districts. That's what the service centers are all about. And so we listened to what the LEAs were saying. We know there's conversations coming about students and potential compensatory services. And we knew that we had only dispersed $30 million of our $50 million allotment in round one. So there's still $20 million that is available to support LEAs in this need, in this time of need. So we talked with TEA and said, hey, there's this additional funding, and we think it would be really great if we could try to open around two much, much faster than we ever imagined we would need to. Two are at the heart of it, trying to figure out the best support possible for LEAs during this time. And they have really cleared the path and made huge agreements to change some key aspects of the grant program to make it more usable for LEAs for a longer term of time, and to make it easier for them to really get access to this funding. So kudos to Dr. Fisher and the team up at TEA for helping to move this along with us.
Yeah, that's huge. The turnaround and the investment on the part of TEA and really ESC 20, the work y'all have done has been exceptional. Talk a little bit about the difference between some of the nuances. You mentioned that we've changed it. We've tried to make it more efficient. We've tried to, additionally, like some things that are different in the fiscal supports grant for people that are currently, you know, have applied and been approved, or those that are thinking about in the upcoming round two of this grant. Like, what is different this year from last year?
Okay, well, it feels like, I'm sure, I don't know if you guys feel this way, but I sometimes feel like with this COVID-19 period, every day I open my email, there's like a new update or new change to something. And it's just kind of like this constant state of influx and flexibility, and really just being comfortable with some uncertainties. And so that's kind of what it feels like with regard to special ed fiscal support, perhaps for our LEAs. But we're really trying to make these decisions and changes in the best interests of LEAs. So LEAs that applied with us in round one, we were able to get the timeline for the funding that they received extended. We originally were under the timeline of every month, all of your money gave out had to be spent by August 31st of 2020. Well, the pandemic school closure timeframe is just not going to allow that to really be feasible to happen. And so we were in conversations with TEA, determined that the extended timeline for all funds received in round one would now be good through May 31st of 2021. So they
That's
have
huge.
all the
Yeah.
rest of the year, the rest of this year and into next year to spend down that money to support students with disabilities. And in round two, the same timeline applies. So if they apply for round two money, that money is good through May 31st of 2021. So it can be used to reimburse previous expenses all the way going back to the beginning of the 2019 school year, or for expenses that have yet to be incurred that will be reimbursed through the end of that time frame. So we felt like that was a really positive change for the districts and gives them much more decision-making power in the best way to support students with this extra money. So that's the biggest change. The next change that we are going to see between round one and round two is that in round one, we asked districts to put down the actual number of students that they had documented in IEPs receiving compensatory services, or ESY. And we know that this is kind of the great state of uncertainty right now. So we recognize that districts haven't made all those decisions yet, and they might not for quite some time. And we don't know what that time frame looks like. We don't know how long school will be out of session, if that'll be just through May, that'll be through the end of the year. And so the biggest change here is districts can enter projected amounts of students. So a projected number of kids that they think are going to receive compensatory services based on some of the prioritizing that they may have done with their service provision during this time. And they can enter a projected number of students for ESY supports in the same way. We know that this is not a time where they probably have definitive data just yet, but they're probably already starting to look forward and look ahead and say about how many, which students, which services do we think we're going to need to have some conversations about. So we've added that additional flexibility into the application process. So that's kind of the main points for round one and round two. I think the second part of your question was about what's different between fiscal support and evaluation capacity. And basically, the biggest difference between fiscal support and evaluation capacity is that we expanded the areas of funding that are available. It's not just for initial evaluation supports anymore. We have those three areas, which I think, John, you were kind of right, like a prophetic statement to have compensatory services in ESY and state legislation from last summer, thinking, oh, would that really be something that districts need a tremendous amount of help with? And here we are, 9 months later saying, yeah, this is something that districts just might need a pretty tremendous amount of help with.
Yeah.
So we expanded those categories of funding and really tried our best to conduct stakeholders groups with people that participated with us in evaluation capacity and make changes that they asked for, that were just about, how do you make this easier for us? How do you make it more accessible? How, as the end user, as the client, as the school district or charter school, how is this going to work out the best for us? And so we heard them. We changed our procedures for consolidated SSA applications. We changed our procedures for expenditure reporting. We changed our procedures for contract services. We went ahead and asked for permission to do lump sum values and so that districts could have the money to spend down on their own coffers. So we heard all that feedback, and the feedback from the schools in Texas was essential to us to help us kind of really sharpen the process and improve it each time, whether that was from fall to spring of evaluation capacity or as evaluation capacity morphed into special ed fiscal support. At the root of it, we really took all the feedback that we got from the end users and tried to be responsive to that as much as possible.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think those who participated in the eval capacity grant last year and were very thankful for the opportunity to have those additional funds, like we had talked before, at times got a little bogged down in a few of the processes of documentation or drawing down the funds or writing the contract, things like that. And so it's really cool to see that that process has been streamlined this year for those that are participating. And I'm sure we'll be getting positive feedback on that from the LEAs out there that are in round one of these processes. So going into round two, what do you want educators to know out there, you know, that have considered maybe applying for these funds, but maybe opted not to in the first round, or that maybe have questions about how's this going to impact my MOE, or just some of those questions that are out there, those fears that are prohibiting them from really drawing down and applying for and drawing down these funds?
If you have hesitation to apply for these funds, the most critical thing to think about is applying in collaboration with your local business office professionals. You know, I said earlier, I'm an LSSP by trade. I know I'm looking at y'all, and I know, John, you were a special ed director. Amy and Pam, you both were special educators. You know, none of us went to college I didn't go to business school. I didn't, not an accountant. I can do a pretty decent job of balancing a checkbook, but, but I'm not a forensic accountant or an auditor. So I think that a lot of us in the field of special education, as we became administrators in special education, that's an area that we really seek a lot of growth and learning in that financial management of federal grants and money and different pots of money. And so I think it's essential and critical that a special ed director work alongside and collaborate with their local business manager to ensure that the funding that they would apply for would be funding that can be utilized locally for them. And so I love that you brought up that maintenance of effort conversation, John, because it truly is the hanging point for a lot of districts and whether or not they decide to apply for this funding. And so with evaluation capacity in the 18-19 school year, that was a federal pot of money. So it flowed to Region 20 as federal funds, and we then in turn were able to kind of flow it back into LEAs as federal money. So it's a pretty smooth process. Now, special ed fiscal support is different because it comes from a different origination source. Special ed fiscal support is a $50 million pot of money that was given directly from the state legislature as state money. So it's not coming as IDEA funds, it's coming as state allotment of funding. And as such, it is going to have different implications in potential maintenance of effort calculations. So for instance, if you applied for special ed support and fiscal support and you got allotted, let's say you got $10,000. $10,000 comes into your local budgets as state money, or however you're going to code it back to you as state money. So if you take that money and utilize it to reimburse a local budget or another budget, it is probably not going to have an impact. But if you take that money and you spend it in a federal pot of money that already has a requirement to spend for special education, basically you've just double spent then. And that could increase your maintenance of effort over time. So it's really key to work with local business offices to determine what's the best place to reimburse this state funding source into your local budget management.
Yeah, I love how you are giving those examples, because I think a lot of times, you know, in the area of special ed finance, we have that, you know, it is such a nuanced area of educational financing that there are so many rules that are applied that it really does take a collaboration between those of us in the, you know, the operations and in the instructional side of the house, the program side of the house, really to collaborate with those of us in the business office in our LEAs. And so, you know, because not really one side of the house is not going to be able to manage, first of all, these funds effectively, but in general, special ed funding and finance and budgeting effectively. It really does take a collaboration between these two worlds. And so, you know, I know that I've talked to a few directors out there that had concerns with maintenance of effort. And the best way I could explain it is kind of like what you said. You know, it all depends on how you utilize these funds, but it also, you know, the reason these funds are available is because we have seen an upsurge in expense at the LEA level, right? At the district, the charter level, regarding supporting these services and programs and instruction to students with disabilities. And so, it's not like all of a sudden all of these evaluations we've done and all of the students we're supporting are going to just decrease all of a sudden. So, you know, we're seeing this upsurge in responsibility regarding evaluation programming, but with that comes an upsurge in expense that we can expect to sustain over time. And so yeah, it's not a one or the other so much as it is a, hey, look, if you're getting $100,000 in fiscal support, how can you utilize those funds? It might be in some instances those go in to support additional, you know, contract services or evaluations being conducted, things like that. But then it might also be that then part of that isn't used in that capacity. So it only, you know, you can kind of offset that impact on maintenance of effort that your LEA has. And I strongly encourage LEAs out there to reach out to their, you know, their regional education service center business offices. And there are expertise in different service centers in these areas more so than others, but we work collaboratively. And so I just really, this is one of those things you do as a team. And sometimes that team is even bigger than just your LEA.
Absolutely, John. We have a really amazing funding specialist that works at Region 20 who's been a key consultant for some of our LEAs and discussing with them their MOE implications or potential MOE implications for receipt of this funding. But I love that explanation that you gave, because kind of thinking about the origin point of this $50 million, it comes as state money, because what state officials were hearing was exactly what you described. And so in thinking about how that works, if a district had already been spending more than their budgeted amounts, that's really kind of what this idea is about, like the state bridge factor, where we're spending over and above, just kind of like you said, where that surge is that we have previously spent, we know we are going to be needing to help us offset those costs, so that the local budget, which may not only be designated for special education, can be replenished, and then that fund source used back for whatever it was originally intended to be used for.
Yeah, it's a great way of explaining it, Amy. I know, you know, Pam, you say you don't have an expertise in this area, but boy, you've been around doing this long enough that I know this makes sense to you. And I know you support out there in SPED finance from time to time and maintenance of effort and things like that. Do you have anything popping up that you have questions about?
You know, not so much a question. I was just kind of thinking about, you know, as we're looking at, or as LEAs are looking at compensatory services, or extended school year services, you know, really to be mindful of, you know, this grant is available, you know, to apply for, and that, you know, as everybody's been, you know, thinking about, you know, the services they're going to have, you know, really have to provide to the students, that this is really a great opportunity for them, you know, to get money to assist with this. Because some things we don't, you know, I typically deal with 18+ programs. And so it's kind of like, so what would that look like for students who typically would be out doing job training during this time period? And, you know, do you want to do extended school year services or compensatory services where, not maybe if, you know, we're not still sheltered in place, you know, this summer the students will be, you know, participating in those job training opportunities, then have teachers or job coaches there to support them do it, you know, in the summer where they typically might not have been working with the students.
Yeah, that's a great example of kind of leveraging these resources and almost turning this situation we're in kind of to a positive, and saying, hey, if we leverage these resources effectively, we could actually provide more than we normally do in the summer and make up for some of the loss that we're seeing as a result of kids not being in school during these months. And, you know, kind of putting a positive spin on it and utilizing these funds for that fiscal support needed to do so.
One of the big questions that I've encountered from LEAs in their application process is the evaluation monies are only around initial evaluation. So a student has to be going through a child find process to be eligible, for the district to be eligible to count that evaluation or the needs related to that evaluation in their allotment for evaluation funding. But for compensatory service funding and ESY funding, that's open to any student in the district that has that designation of need. So students that are in the 18 plus program that have long been in special education programs, if they're determined to need compensatory service or ESY, those would absolutely be students that included in the calculations and consideration for fiscal support and those two categories.
Yeah. That's a great point. And, and Amy Rogers, I'm gonna let you jump in here, but right just before, I know for directors out there that maybe aren't as involved on the budget side, some of them may not be familiar with the fact that, listen, just because you haven't budgeted for these funds and just because you didn't plan for the expensing of these funds and the encumbrance of these funds doesn't mean that if you were to apply and be granted these funds, that you couldn't work with your business office. And, there are perfectly legitimate, ways to go back and amend your year's budget and reallocate these funds and kind of redistribute state and local funds accordingly. So it's not that, oh, we didn't do this from the beginning, and so what's the point now? It's no, right up to the last day before you turn your stuff in for that audit, you can still work with that business office to do amendments and to change kind of, within rules and within guidelines, how we encumber and expense these funds. And so that's just a great, it's just a great opportunity for schools out there that need these funds. Amy Rogers, jump in. Come on. I didn't mean to jump in on you.
I was just wondering about the flexibility, like with the ESY funds, in the sense of like if a school district stays closed for this school year, and then in looking at, since a lot have been out since the second week of March, looking at how that determination may impact whether they apply or not, but also looking at if we are held through June or whatever, what flexibility there might be since it's next May 31st. I was in a director's meeting, the special ed directors for our region, and that was kind of figuring out, the logistics of it.
Sure thing.
With ESY and compensatory services.
Yeah, and that's that big, huge question mark in the room of how long does this last, this school closure period where we don't actually have direct contact with our students in a face-to-face environment. And so what I would say, Amy, is May 31st is the hard and fast deadline, 2021. And we went to bat for a longer period of time, but in the end, these state funds expire overall in a certain time frame. And so May 31st, 2021 is the currently immovable deadline. I hesitate to say, written in stone, because 3 days from now, there could be a decision made at much, much higher levels than me that changes that. But May 31st, 2021, it is right now. And so for ESY and compensatory services, I think we're going to have to, as a state, get really innovative and creative with how we deliver those services to students. I think we've for a long time thought of compensatory services or ESY services in a very traditional sense. But I think in this world that we're living in, where everything is unknown, I think it brings me back to a quote that we always went to as liaisons learning about design thinking, and that is, creativity craves constraint.
Mm-hmm.
And I really believe that we're going to have to be creative with the process and the implications and how we implement ESY and compensatory services in the future. So we had a directors meeting this morning right before I jumped on with you guys, and some of our districts are already saying things like, okay, well, we're going to look at extended school year and thinking about how do we do extended school day more regularly for kids? How do we think about even Saturday mornings for just really intensive reading recovery for some kids that need to participate? We know we have choice days in November for Monday and Tuesday, right before Thanksgiving break. We are going to do intensive speech boot camp for kids that didn't have speech therapy for a long period of time. We're going to put them in kind of an immersion speech program with kids for 2 days and really get them some really creative services and supports. And I think we're going to see some more of that kind of stuff.
Is that a possibility? Because that was one of the things we talked about this morning, or the directors did, about, you know, maybe an extended school day, or, you know, a Saturday. But can those funds be used if it's an extended school day or program?
As I understand, Amy, those are local education decisions. The way
Absolutely.
The way we create those learning opportunities, you know, especially in Texas where we have independent school districts, right? We have a lot of autonomy over how we design and deliver educational opportunities to schools. I mean, we are still tied to a calendar, and there's certain things that, you know, I mean, of course, Districts of Innovation gives us some fluidity there, but no, I think Amy's, you know, Strauch is hitting on something here is, hey, how creative can we be, and how, you know, even as far as, you know, a lot of the virtual opportunities that we have for students right now in lieu of seat time in our, you know, brick and mortar buildings, you know, how can we leverage that into the summer months as ESY and when appropriate and such. And so I really think the sky's the limit on creativity right now. And I know there's directors out there, there's educators out there that are dreaming up these possibilities. It's going to be exciting to learn more about how they push forward in this space. And
I know our directors are, I think they get very literal. And so the questions come, and I know my special ed director at my ESC, which is Cindy Moses, who knows everything about funding as well, you know, but she was talking about just incidences that had happened in the past where we at a SSA did do an extended school day, but the question was, would the flexibility be in those funds, or because the directors were like, or does that mean, oh, if it's not occurring in the summer, we can't use it? And so just asking that.
No, you know, I think that's a great question. I'm glad that you brought it up, because I can take it and put it on our website Q&A to help people get a little more insight around that. But from as far as we can tell, we go with local discretion. How the ARD committee for an individual student feels that an extended school day, school time, school year best meets the needs of that particular student. You know, in some of the examples that Pam gave, that might not, for a student that's in an 18+ program, waiting until the summer might not be the right kind of extended school day or school year that kid needs. So we really rely and trust in the local decision making of the ARD committees for kids to make those decisions, and then document in the IEP currently or at some point in the future when we're able to really look at all the data and the incidents that has happened during this COVID-19 period, to document accordingly in the student IEP. Because for ESY and compensatory services, we are going to next summer in June of 2021 do a quality assurance check to just make sure that if you applied for funds in those areas, that you have documented in an IEP at that point that those services were deliverable to the child, that you had clear intention and documentation to do that.
That's great. Yeah, that's,
and I think some of that discussion was looking at it as, would we call this extended school year and go ahead and apply for round 2 for ESY, or would it be compensatory, and how to delineate that if it is looking at those services that's done next school year. So,
yeah, Amy, I think that's a great question. I think really as directors think about that, they really need to go back to, you know, what is it that defines, you know, extended school year services by definition of regressive, you know, prevention of regressive tendencies in student, you know, outcomes versus, you know, compensatory services, which sometimes we're trying to make up for something. And so I really think the answer there, sometimes it is difficult to discern between the two, but more often than not, you can kind of land into one bucket a little more than the other. And then I think probably that would be the best route for them to go. But well, Amy Strauch, ESC Region 20 Fiscal Supports Grant, this has been awesome. I just feel guilty for stealing so much of your time. I don't want to keep going on and on, but if you had one last closing statement for our schools, for those that are receiving the grant funds, for those that are considering in round 2, what can you leave us with?
Oh, I think I'll just leave you with this. Round 2 opens April 20th of 2020, and we will accept online applications through May 1st of 2020. All of the information that we've discussed today, timeline, frequently asked questions, and then the application itself are all accessible on our website, which is www.spedfiscalsupport.org. And so I would just say, if you have a question, reach out to your service center representatives, reach out to me at Region 20. Although we are all working and abiding by our shelter in place and social distancing principles, we are all diligently working from home as much as we can. So call, email, reach out if you have questions or clarifications, and go online for some more information. John, will you drop our website into your link for us?
I absolutely will.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
Okay. Well, Pam, Amy Rogers, last words.
Just to be bold in your thinking about this. Sometimes when things happen that we're not prepared for, our creativity can kick in, because this is really challenging our, even our thought process, how we deliver services. When Commissioner Morat came to the, sorry, my dog is barking.
We all have dogs, don't worry.
Came to the service center. One thing he challenged our superintendents was to look at their schedules, the calendars, and really start rethinking about, just traditional calendar that we run, that maybe, if you have to do compensatory services or offer ESY, if the calendars change, so where kids are in school a little bit longer, or they have weeks off in, like in the fall break, a fall break or whatever, and they still look at 180 days differently. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
That we get so tied to this 180-day calendar and delivering it basically the same way every year, as opposed to saying, hey, we could be doing something differently with our students, for all kids. And so this might be the opportunity some districts will need, just to think about, okay, we have these services we need to provide for our students. We're seeing special education services. Other students can benefit for some type of enrichment type program, because, having missed so much school. So it's got, I guess, I just don't think, it's just going to be an interesting time just to see how we rebound, and will we continue to do what we've done in the past, or will we become more creative and think about how we're delivering instruction and doing this thing, what we call school.
Absolutely. Creativity craves constraints. I think that's our quote of the day. And I think
my word is innovate.
Innovate. We've got to innovate, and we've got to be creative. So guys, thank you all for joining us for this episode of SPED Talk. It's going to be a good one. We'll get it out to you as quick as we can. To continue to elevate the conversation, hit us up on Twitter at SPEDTalk 2020, where you can find links to all of our episodes and each of the resources that we discussed today.
John, also links to the resources will be available at our podcast site.
And if you found these resources helpful, be sure to share them with a friend, because information should always flow through us, not to us.
That will do it for this episode of SPED Talk.
And remember, courage creates culture, and kindness keeps us connected.
Until the next time, I'm Pam.
And I've been John.
And this is
SPED Talk.
Elevate the thunder.
Living in the moment, and the moment is the future.
Region with Pam and